Okay. Yeah, so with all this wonderful chanting, okay, uh, why are we still not enlightened? I mean, we chanted it all, 32 parts, we're the owners of our karma. Nature to age, sicken and die. Why are we still attached to all this stuff? Hard to say, isn't it? I don't really know how to go on in this retreat, because again, there's so much you can talk about, and sometimes I feel like I don't want to really repeat yourself, but then I ask people if they remember what I talked last time, and then they can't remember, so I could technically speak the same talk every time, probably wouldn't matter. But the problem is I don't even remember what I talked about last time, so it's just whatever comes out. So I don't know, maybe today is a good day to talk a little bit about those things that obstruct our practice. I talked a little bit about these hindrances yesterday, and really it's the main work, is to try and overcome them. But to overcome something, we have to first of all be able to see it as an obstacle. And so it's like you have these first two hindrances, which are these extremes of liking and disliking, greed and hatred, attraction and aversion. So it's these two things that always change in the mind. It's like we're always either wanting something or wanting to get rid of something, and that's what takes a lot of energy away. So the more we actually learn how to be equanimous with what is going around us, the more or the less energy we actually spend, and the more energy we actually have. But the problem is, people trying to be equanimous, that might actually end up leading to a sense of aversion as well. Because equanimity, it doesn't mean I don't care. It doesn't mean I don't give a damn. And people mistake that sometimes for equanimity. But equanimity is actually a wholesome mind state that is at peace, at ease with what goes on around us. But we have to look at these forces that keep pulling us one way or another, liking and disliking all the time. So we need to see them as a burden. Now, it's easy to see hatred or aversion or negativity as a burden, but in a world where desire is encouraged, where greed is encouraged, where lust is encouraged, it's hard to see that as a problem. I mean, society doesn't function if we're not greedy bastards, can it? I mean, all the stuff they want us to buy, you got to be pretty desirous to go and buy all that stuff, isn't it? And if we don't buy it, then the economy goes down. So it's like it's a bit of a catch-22 there, isn't it? So what are we going to do about that? So are Buddhists bad for the economy? I don't know. But it's something that we need to investigate in our own minds. We need to see how we become a slave to these things, and only then can we see it as a burden. We have to see it as suffering. Need to see it as a problem. So with desire, how do we deal with it? With this constant need for something. If we, again, don't have anything to fall back on within ourselves, then we always need things outside. So if we want to encourage our desire, which in and of itself is not necessarily evil or bad. If we don't have any desire, we wouldn't be here today. So it's also a misunderstanding that all desire is inherently evil or bad. We need a desire to want to change. We need to desire to want peace. We need to desire to aspire towards the things that are worth aspiring to. And that's where we need to draw the line. It's like what is actually within, what is good for us, and what is exceeding that. So, really, to know where to apply our desire, and what we really need to know is what is right and wrong, what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. Which brings us, first of all, to that last of those 5 hindrances, which is the doubt. And sometimes doubting, when people read doubt is a hindrance, well, what are we doubting? And as Buddhists, sometimes we think we still have doubts in the Buddha, still have doubts in the Dhamma or the Sangha, doubts in our own practice, in our own ability. But the major part of doubt in the context of these 5 hindrances is doubt about what is wholesome or what is unwholesome, what is right and what is wrong. So that means it goes back to right view, right understanding, which is the first factor of the Eightfold Path. We need to know what is kusala, what is akusala, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. What is leading to our benefit and to benefit of others, and benefit of both, and what is leading to our own suffering, to the suffering of others and the suffering of both. So that's really what the Buddha meant by doubt in the context of the 5 hindrances. So, I don't know, if I were to ask, or if somebody were to ask you, what is wholesome and what is unwholesome? I mean, how could we define it? What's a good definition to kind of memorize or to use as a way to gauge these things? How could we define that? Any ideas? No ideas? So you're all still doubting what is wholesome and what is unwholesome? How do you... It's a famous saying that you find on every other Buddha statue in some park or something. Is a quote that we see it all over the place. It's like doing good and avoiding evil and purifying the mind. That is the teaching of all the Buddhas. Sappa papasa akaranang kusala supasampada sacitta pariyotapanang itang buddhana sasanang is a Pali Some people chant it, incorporate it in their chantings. We chant it every fortnight at the end of the recitation of the monks' rules. Sappa papa. Papa is the evil, to avoid evil. Shouldn't do any evil. And kusala supa sampara, to cultivate that which is good and to purify the mind. It's the teaching of all the Buddhas. But again, you read that and you kind of go, well, what is evil? What is good? Where's the line? Is it flexible? Come on, any great ideas? Gotta wake up now, Sunday morning, come on. I can't do all the talking here. Yeah? Sorry? Yeah, the suggestion was to use the five precepts as a baseline. And remember, I did say, I think I did say yesterday, that is our birthright as a human being, which also means that anything less than keeping the five precepts we're running as a possibility of not being born in the human realm again, because the five precepts is what makes us human, truly human. So yeah, that's a good standard, definitely. But it's, the most general definition we come across, at least the one that I just remember off the top of my head, is that if it leads to our own affliction, and it leads to others' affliction, and it leads to the affliction of both. So that's what's called akusala, or unwholesome. If it doesn't lead to our own affliction, it doesn't lead to the affliction of others, and it doesn't lead to the affliction of both, then it's supposedly kusala, wholesome. So if, affliction is like, harm, if you like, if it doesn't lead to our own harm of others, harm of both, I think that's a fairly general but accurate and adequate way of defining wholesome and unwholesome, which I suppose people will still use and try to interpret differently. But then we have something like the five precepts to fall back on as a standard. So killing living beings, all beings, they love their life more than anything else. So taking life is obviously leading to the affliction of others, and by that also to our own affliction. Stealing, taking away what people worked hard for, earned, and then speaking what is not true, deceiving, lying, also what they call backbiting, like repeating over there what you heard here, sort of the kind of gossiping that people do. But also, interestingly enough, useless speech, like what they call idle chatter. I gave, in the early years, especially here, everybody wanted me to give a talk on right speech, so I gave at least 3 or 4 in Singapore that I remember. And one thing I always mention in those talks was the fact that for lying and deceit and got these sort of what do you call it? Misrepresenting the truth. There's actually laws against these kinds of speech, but there's no law against idle chatter. So people can still talk nonsense without being held responsible for it. But that's where we waste a lot of time, isn't it? We talk a lot of things that we don't really need to talk about. So when we have established in our own minds, what is right and wrong, what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, what actually leads to our own benefit, to the benefit of others, to the benefit of both, as opposed to leading to our own affliction of others or affliction of both, then we got a good idea. Also what we should be desiring. So we shouldn't be desiring anything that leads to others' affliction or our own affliction. And it gives it a bit more shape, what desire or where our desire should really be focused. And then usually in the world, when we're told we should be desiring things, then we're actually looking at the goal of what we want, and then we're desiring that. But as I mentioned in the context of meditation many times here, I think, is that we need to understand how to get the goal, is how to establish the causes that will arrive at the goal. Because if everything is cause and effect, if everything arises because of conditions, then what we should be focusing on is, well, what are the causes that I need to establish for that goal to actually come about as an effect? And then we can actually apply our desire more skillfully and make effort based on that desire. And then it's called right desire. It's actually a thing that is useful and helpful. Because we need to build up energy, to rouse energy, we need a goal. We need to know what we want. If we sit down here and try to meditate and don't really know what we're aspiring to, then we might be sitting here and nothing much happens. But if we set a clear goal at the beginning of the meditation, that's why the Buddha teaches a gradual training, and why in the teaching on meditation on the breath, the Buddha gives these different stages. Because then we actually have stages that we can aspire to. For instance, like I said yesterday, the being able to know whether I'm breathing in, know whether I'm breathing out. It's a very simple goal. And the goal is achieved when at the least once during the in-breath you remember, now I'm breathing in. And the goal is achieved, but at least once during the out-breath you remember, now I'm breathing out. That's not so hard to attain. So you have enough mindfulness to know at some point during your in-breath, I'm breathing in. At some point during your out-breath, I'm breathing out. The rest of the time, you can think about whatever you want. Dinner, your next holiday, whatever. But you got to come back when you're breathing out to at least remember once, aha, now I'm breathing out. So it's like an easy task. It's one that we can achieve. But it's not so frustrating then to set a goal for yourself which you just can't achieve yet. So if you manage to do that, if you have enough mindfulness to be with the breath at least once during each in and out breath, clearly knowing, aha, now I'm breathing in. That's already more mindfulness than most people in the world have. So it's encouraging. And it's only once you've managed that you actually go and make the next determination, set the next goal, yeah, which then would be to experience the whole breath. From the very beginning of the in-breath to the very beginning of the out-breath. The very beginning of the out-breath to the end of the out-breath. So that's a lot of mindfulness you need for that. So to be with the breath during the whole of the in-breath and not lose it even once. And be with the breath for the whole out-breath and not lose it even once. Now that's pretty tough. So that second level is harder to attain. But once we set that goal, we're still dealing with these hindrances. Because people always say, well, I'm doing calm meditation, I'm not doing insight, or I'm doing insight, I'm not doing calm. People have all these confusions, which is which and what is what. Yeah. But if your goal is simply that, of calming the mind by being with one object like the breath for the full duration of the in and out breath, you still need wisdom. You still need to know what to do when the hindrances attack you and don't let you achieve that goal. So it's not as if you're just sitting there and chilling out. It's still hard work in the sense that as soon as the desire comes up that wants to point the mind in another direction, you have to pull the mind back. You have to remember, this is not the goal, this is not what I'm supposed to do. As soon as any irritation comes into the mind, any kind of aversion, any negativity that takes the awareness, takes the full attention away from the breath, you need to deal with that. And I like these similes, like Luang Por Chah, he was brilliant with that. I always loved that simile of the spider. You know that simile of the spider in the spider web? And the spider always sits in the center of its web, right? And then when a fly comes and it gets stuck in one of the sticky edges of the spider web, only then the spider just runs over there, wraps up the fly for later on, and then goes back to the center. Yeah? And so that's what we're doing. We're sitting in the center of the mind. We're watching the mind. We're watching the mind, watching the breath, if you like. And then any of the hindrances come, yeah? And then we need to go out and deal with them with wisdom. We need to see them as impermanent. We need to see them as suffering. We need to see them as not self. Like, we didn't ask the mind to turn towards aversion, did we? We didn't ask the mind to all of a sudden come up with a strange desire, did we? No, our goal is, I'm sitting now to watch the breath. But then the desire comes, uninvited. The aversion comes, uninvited. The restlessness comes, uninvited. The sleepiness comes, uninvited. The doubt comes, uninvited. So who are these guys? Who do they think they are? Coming to disturb my meditation. It's like that. If you think like that, as ridiculous and preposterous as it might sound, it reveals something. It reveals the very fact that we're not in control. We can't control these desires. We can't control these aversions. We can't control the restlessness, the sleepiness, the doubt. Why? Because they're conditioned. The causes for these things to arise have long been set. So we're stranded with the results that we don't even want. So what we can do is apply wisdom at that point. We know we didn't invite them, and we know they're not permanent, so they're impermanent. We know they're disturbing us, so they're actually suffering, definitely not happiness. So, and because we can't control them, they're also not self. So those three characteristics of anicca, dukkha, anatta, they can be applied to these hindrances the moment we actually see them. And if that is really the case, the mind should pull away from them. It should be able to separate itself from the hindrances. So there should be an aspect of the mind that knows a hindrance as a hindrance. So we are not the hindrances. You see what I'm getting at? It's like, how do you get rid of something that is yours? How do you attack something that belongs to you? How do you abandon something that is yourself? You can't. You got to see it as not self. You got to see it as not me, not mine. You got to see it as a sankhara. Remember, I was talking about sankhara yesterday when I tried to look at the dual benefits of breath meditation. One, the calming, but also the development of wisdom, where I talked about the breath as a formation of the body. So we can look at these things in terms of formations. We can look upon these things as aliens. Aliens. Uninvited aliens. And if you actually establish that kind of attitude towards them in the mind, if it becomes almost like second nature, then whenever these kind of hindrances show themselves, if mindfulness is strong enough to see them, most of the time we don't have enough mindfulness to see it. We just become a prey to the hindrances. And before we know it, we're sleeping. Before we know it, we're restless off somewhere thinking about this, that, and the other. We're lost in some desirous fantasy or in some obsessive aversion. Or we're sitting there scratching our head, doubting, whatever, But with mindfulness, with time, when we establish our mindfulness, we will be more and more aware of these hindrances the moment they actually occur in the mind. And then with that right attitude of seeing them as something undesirable, seeing them for what they are, conditions, formations, things that have been caused through our own actions of the past, caused also by delusion, by ignorance, past desires, past aversions. It's all the process of conditioning. They don't come out of the blue. It's just that we're not really aware of the causes, because the causes are already in the past. But with time, the mind gains more clarity, and we actually become aware, because there's more space in the mind, there's more quiet in the mind, there's more clarity in the mind. So we actually notice when there is a disturbance arising, when these hindrances come up. And we catch them straight away, like the spider. And we wrap them up in anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering, not me, not mine, not a self. And then we go back to our center. We go back to equilibrium. We go back to equanimity. We could go back to that place in the mind from which we watch. It's the other simile Luang Por Chah like giving is like you know what train spotting is? I'm not talking about the train spotting. I'm talking about the hobby. People go and sit at these railway stations, and they're actually spotting trains. So real trains. So it's like you're sitting at the railway station and you jot down all the different names of these different trains. And then you have these kind of competitions with other people about how many trains you see. And, you've seen this one, and I've said, you haven't seen that one in a long time. So it's like entertaining. It's like what people do for entertainment. And so for us, it can also be entertainment if you do it with the right attitude. You do it. You're watching the mind, and you're watching the different trains of thoughts coming in and out. And you can actually give them names. I used to do that for a rains retreat once, where I just kind of figured out that my mind has certain patterns, certain thought patterns that it falls back on. Yeah? And I don't know about you, but I suppose it depends on the kind of complicated nature of each individual. I say a complicated person, I don't know, maybe he has 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 patterns, right? Somebody who's a bit more simple-minded, he might only have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or I don't know what, you know. So anyway, you identify your thought patterns. And then once they come up in the mind, in the form of one of these hindrances, usually, because that's what they are, they just come to disturb you basically, just disturb your peace and quiet, then you call out their name. So there's the wise guy, who always got something really wise to say. And then there's the scavenger, who's basically sort of, picking up garbage. You got the fool. You got the joker. I don't know what else you might have. You might get the angry one. Yeah, you got the angry guy, the angry Hulk, maybe you want to call him. Then you got the lustful guy, and then you got the greedy guy. Anyway, you give these thought patterns, give them different names. Yeah? And then every time they come up, you identify them, and then you name them. Oh, I tell you, your mind is going to be furious with you. It's going to be furious with you. It won't like it, not a bit. Because you're catching them out. You're catching them out, and you see them for what they are. And it is stupid thought patterns that come up, trying to get on your nerves. Yeah? So then the mind gets very tricky. Yeah? So the smart one, the wise guy, he comes up with ever more wise ways of sneaking up on you and telling you this new story to get involved in. But then you catch him anyway. You say, yeah, you're the wise guy. I remember you. Anyway, so you do that for a while, and I did that for a whole 3-month rains retreat, and it took me about, close to almost 2 months for the mind to give up. Yeah? But until then, my mind would be really angry with me because I would always catch them, But then after 2 months, it's almost like the mind kind of the kind of thinking mind, the mind of the hindrances, it kind of shrunk away, and it just kind of it couldn't attack anymore. It lost its means to attack. And so I actually discovered that by doing that, the mind would actually go very peaceful, very quiet. It was a very nice experience. But it was hard work in the beginning, especially because you're actually meeting with the resistance of these defilements. They're not going to give up easily. Yeah. But the thing is, you can't trust them. And they're certainly not your friends. Yeah. But we take them to be our friends, and we do trust them again and again. And then we fall again. We fall for them again and again. Yeah. So after a while, you get to know what's good for you. You get to know what's good for you and what's bad for you. Yeah. And so when desire and aversion come up in the mind, you know these things are not good for you, not good for others, and you actually do something about them. You actually apply effort to get rid of them. You find your own skillful means. Everybody has to find their own skillful means to deal with these kind of thought patterns. This kind is normal. Yeah. But then you also have these other hindrances, like this general restlessness and remorse. Remorse is usually, the kind of remorse you have when you had a lapse in your virtue. You said something you shouldn't have said, or didn't say something you should have said, or whatever. That usually becomes a hindrance. So it's usually when we sit quiet in meditation, then these kind of regret and remorse and these kind of things, they come up, they creep up on us. Usually if we can distract ourselves by doing things all day long, these things sort of don't come up. We hardly remember the stupid things we did or didn't do. But when we sit meditation, unfortunately, then these things come up. It's a bit like dying, isn't it? And just before you die, you remember all the bad things you did. Oh dear. And then it goes down. So that's why when we are with people who die, we should always remind them of the good things they did. So at least they get a good mind state before they die and they go to heaven. It doesn't mean all the bad stuff they did gets erased. It doesn't mean if they think about the bad things, all the good things get erased. But at least they have a good chance. And that's what we do in meditation. We kind of, try to remind ourselves of good things. So when the restlessness comes up, it's probably the most insidious of those hindrances, because it's not necessarily defined. It's like the restlessness is so general that sometimes we don't know what we're restless about. There's this, you just notice there is this movement, this inability for the mind to just be still. And that's a tough one to deal with. And the way I try to deal with it is, I've noticed that in every state of mind, if you look at every state of mind as a sphere or a place, if you like, or something that has that extends in space, then if you look at that sphere or you look at that space, there's areas, there's parts of it which are more peaceful than others. So it's like even in a state of irritation, you look at that state, it's not just one solid, it's not one solid experience of only and exclusively irritation. There are aspects of it which are less irritating. And so we look at experience, we look at the state of our mind, we look at what we're actually experiencing, and then we're looking for a more peaceful aspect in that experience. And we're trying to calm the mind by turning towards that. And then if that becomes the new sphere, then there is a space where again we can look for an even more peaceful aspect of that experience. And so it's like we're moving inward. We're taking the mind away from its most coarse and irritating features, and we're moving towards something more peaceful. And it's usually more inside. So we're bringing the mind inside, we're bringing the mind home. We're looking for that awareness within the experience which is more peaceful. And of course, ideally, you can look at awareness itself, but that's a tough one if you haven't got that experience yet. Because when you know irritation, the irritation is the object, but the knowing is still the mind. When you know any state of mind, the state of mind changes, but that which is aware of the state of mind, the quality of awareness, the quality of knowing, it remains, there's a constancy there. And there's something that you can use to fall back on. So if you ever get more peaceful in the meditation, then that's an aspect to pay attention to. And that's a part of the mind or part of our experience that we should train. Is this awareness, this ability to know. And once we have that more and more at our fingertips, then even when there is objects in the mind that are unpleasant, such as the hindrances, such as memories that we really didn't invite and are not really keen to remember, or anything at all, there is always the mind that knows about these things. And it's that quality of sati, that quality of awareness, that quality of mindfulness that we need to train, to fall back on. So when there's restlessness, like I said, see if you can find a more peaceful aspect in that experience. Or see if you can turn to the knowing itself. And it's the same with sloth and torpor. Usually sloth and torpor, once it got us, we're sitting there and we're nodding away. And you can't get out of it. Remember the similes the Buddha gave for sloth and torpor? You remember the simile for that? For sloth and torpor? No? Huh? Now it's the prison. If you don't remember, I'll tell them later on. They're quite instructive. But the one for the hindrance of sleepiness, sloth and torpor, is being imprisoned, because it feels like you're imprisoned. You can't break out of it. Yeah? So if you are about to meditate and the sloth and torpor becomes your hindrance, then the best thing is to fight it right from the beginning. It's like you start your meditation and you know, oh, today I'm sleepy. This is going to be a sleepy meditation. Yeah? So then you know this is going to be the hindrance that is most likely going to get you during your meditation. So you set yourself up and you get in this warrior pose and you're just waiting. And you're just waiting. And as soon as sleepiness comes, you go, yeah, got you. And it's like you're fighting against it, you know, you're not giving in. So every time you notice you're nodding off, you pull yourself back, And you put forth effort like that. I guarantee if you do that for half an hour or 45 minutes, the end of the meditation will actually be very nice, because you get rewarded for that effort. Once the mind then wakes up, and the sloth and torpor fades, sometimes it can just fade from one moment to the other. And you might notice, wow, the mind is awake. Now I'm aware. But once you give in, once you allow that sleepiness to come over you and imprison you, it's very difficult. You're likely to be sitting there for half an hour, nodding away. So these are those sort of hindrances: desire, aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness, remorse, and doubt. But the similes are quite good. The one for the desire is being in debt. Like sense desires is like being in debt. There's always a price to pay. You get nothing for free. That's the idea. So if we buy into that desire for sense pleasure, there's always the idea is there's always a price to pay. So we're actually in debt. We're not actually free. We're always in debt to the possibility that someone comes around and tries to cash in. It's like I must have told you that I've got a coaster lying on my table in my kuti. You know what a coaster is? Where you put your beer on it, like a cardboard thing. And when I was a teenager and used to go drinking in the pub, the barkeep, he'd make a line with a pencil on the coaster for every beer. So it's like 4 lines and then a cross makes 5. Another 4, cross. So you had 10 beer, 15 beer, I don't know, whatever you could drink at night. You had like 10 or 15 lines on the coaster. So you were drinking, you wouldn't have to pay. But at the end of the evening, the barkeeper would say, hey, give me all your money. But then if you knew the guy, you could say, come on, man, I'll pay next time. And he'd take the coaster and he'd put it on the shelf. If you were regular, and you could do that. But you could do that for so long only. Eventually he'd come and say, it's time to pay up. So there you are. I like that idea because it always reminded me of those days. But it's also a very good example for being in debt. You get nothing for free. So the second hindrance, the aversion, a hatred, it's like a disease, the Buddha said. You remember that? Some of you remember that, I'm sure. Must have told it here many times. Because if we are angry, we're like a sick person. You can see it like angry people, their facial features, they contort and they become really ugly. They're ugly with rage, anger. You get hot, you're boiling. So an angry person is like a person who is sick. A greedy person is in debt. And then the restlessness is being a slave. Because you're always being niggered around. Go do this, go do that, fetch this, go that, take that, bring that. You're always being ordered around. You're a slave to restlessness. Restlessness always orders you around. You're never free to do what you want because you're always told what to do. It's like being a slave. And then the sloth and torpor, like I said, is like a prison. You're a prisoner. You're cooped up in that state of sloth and torpor. You can't break out. You can't break free. And then the last one, doubt, is like being lost in the desert. You're completely lost. It's like sand in all directions. You've got no foggy idea where to go, how to get out of there. So it's being lost, or lost in the desert. And I like these similes. We should make an effort to remember them, because they're also good, because once these states arrive in our mind, then with these similes, we have a story, and we remember. And then when we have a good story, we also maybe remember the antidote. What to do with desire is to remember. So long as it's desire that is leading towards the wholesome, and not to anyone's affliction, not our own even, then it's okay. We need to make effort, and that needs to be based in desire. We need to have a goal. And the aversion, the antidote to that is, first of all, you can reflect on karma. When people do bad things, when people irritate you, you can remember they are the owners of their karma, they're heir to their karma, born of their karma. They can't really act in any other way. But it also means they will receive the fruits of their actions. So we don't have to be other people's judge. We don't have to judge anybody. Yeah? Karma will judge them. We don't need to punish anybody. That's one way of dealing with irritation, with anger. And of course there's loving kindness. But the thing is that people always think loving kindness is this sort of one-size-fits-it-all kind of antidote for anger and aversion. And it isn't, because if you haven't practiced loving kindness at a time when you feel good about yourself, if you haven't done your homework, if somebody irritates you, there's no way you can bring up loving kindness. You just want to smack the guy in the face, you know. So if you really want to use loving kindness as your antidote, because it is a beautiful antidote, it works, but you have to practice it at home when you're not irritated. You need to know what that love feels in the heart. You need to know what that goodwill actually means in your own experience, in your own heartfelt experience. And then when somebody irritates you, you can turn towards your heart and you bring up that feeling of well-wishing. And you wish well, you mean well, you have goodwill, you have kindness. But if you wait until somebody makes you angry, then it doesn't work that way. But you can always reflect on karma. You don't have to judge other people. And most of the time, interestingly enough, and in retrospect I'm sure you would have noticed that as well, is quite often when you think they were out to make you angry or to do something towards you, you find in the end it wasn't meant personally at all. It wasn't meant personal. So we tend to take things personal very quickly. And quite often we find it's not personal. They're just being stupid. They're just doing what they were doing. And they didn't even think of us. But we take it on board. And we think it's meant towards us. You know. So remember that. The next time you realize that, I took it personal again, but it wasn't actually meant toward me. Remember that. Yeah? Because that next time it can help you to get all worked up, help you to not get all worked up when somebody is seemingly trying to get you for something, you know. So remember the antidotes for that, and then the antidote for sloth and torpor is you need to fight. You need to really strive. You need to really fight to catch it before it catches you. You got to psych yourself up at the beginning of the meditations. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give in. And you fight. And then your effort is being rewarded. And the restlessness, look for peace. And try to bring up a perception of peace from the past. Look for the most peaceful aspect in that state of mind that you're in. Remember peace. Remember what it feels like. See restlessness as suffering. Yeah? And then you want to get out of it. And you're looking for peace. And if you've developed peaceful states in the past, sometimes you can avert to the peace from the past, to a perception that is conducive to peace. You got to bring up these perceptions. Maybe this afternoon I'll talk a bit about perceptions. It's a very important subject where we need to develop certain perceptions. And then doubt, of course, in the end, the last of these evil hindrances. How do we overcome doubt? Well, the only way to really overcome it is to ask people who know the right questions at the right time. Ask the Buddha, look in the suttas, listen to teachers you trust, read the books that are actually written by those who know what they're talking about. These days everybody writes a book about Buddhism because it's hip or in, or maybe they can make a buck of it or something, but a lot of them are real rubbish. I mean, half the stuff I see on the German market these days, I wouldn't even use as toilet paper, honestly. That's real rubbish. And they try to explain everything away. I mean, they seriously go on saying karma. The Buddha never really talked about karma. It's a later edition, What the? They talk about, the jhanas, you don't really need the jhanas there. And it's later editions, people have made that up, So, come on, guys, give me a break. You read the suttas, it's like every other sutta the Buddha talks about jhanas, so he can explain it away. Yeah. So it's like you got to know your stuff. Go to the Buddha, go to the original teachings, and then you can look at contemporary literature and actually manage to separate the rubbish from the good stuff. So yeah, you need to clarify your doubts with regard to what is right and wrong, good and bad, right view, wrong view. And you got to do some study. You got to know Buddhist teaching. So faith is all good, well and good, but you got to make the effort to actually find out what the Buddha actually taught, what he really taught, and not what somebody says he taught. The worst thing are the commentaries. You know what the commentaries are on the Buddhist scriptures? The commentaries are usually the ones that say, well, this is what the Buddha said, but this is actually what he meant. So these guys write books 250 years after the Buddha, trying to explain what the Buddha actually meant, as if the Buddha was stupid, So it's unbelievable. So know your stuff, and know these hindrances, know the antidotes, know the similes. But most importantly, know them in your own mind. And see them as a burden, see them as suffering, see them as anicca, dukkha, anatta. See them as something that you need to do something about if you want to get peaceful states of mind. But also see them as an opportunity to develop wisdom, because that's what they are. They're challenging you. So if you see them as a challenge and you apply your wisdom, and you can overcome them with time. Mindfulness becomes more and more strong. That knowing quality of the mind becomes your refuge. You can fall back on that. And you're no longer so easily deceived. You're not so easily led astray by these thought patterns, because you can identify them. When the scavenger comes around, it's a scavenger. Not me, not mine, not my thoughts. Just a guy who collects rubbish. Okay, so we're currently facing the challenge of the festivities getting started down there, so it's your good opportunity now to remember Ajahn Chah's teachings on who disturbs the noise. So don't go disturbing the noise when you meditate. And I personally enjoy this kind of challenge, because when we're talking about concentration, which is what samadhi is supposed to be, we need to be able to take away our interest from one thing and put it onto another thing. And just to give you a bit of an incentive, you know, Luang Por Plian, the one of the famous monks, he had such strong samadhi that he would have operations performed on him without anesthesia, because he took his mind away from that. He could just watch it as it was, and the doctors would cut into his leg. He had a big pussy kind of a tumor, like a wound in his thigh, and the doctors were afraid. They said, "No, we can't do the operation without anesthetics." And he said, "Don't worry," because he was afraid he was going to move and he would cut and hurt him even more. He said, "Don't worry." So he just concentrated his mind and just let the doctor perform the operation. So if you got that strong samadhi, and that little bit of noise there, it's not a problem. So take that as your inspiration this morning.